Yo, what's up guys, welcome, it's InfernoKun, and welcome to my review of episode 2, Children of Arkham for Batman The Telltale Series. So, I'm going to start off with giving my 3 favorite moments in the episodes, then I'll go ahead and go into my in-depth review, talking about what I liked in terms of the story, the character development, the choices, and all that kind of stuff in this review. So let's go ahead and start with the third favorite moment in episode 2. It was definitely the GCPD scene with Falcone. Now that scene was definitely really good in terms of a twist, and of course, you know, a lot of information getting from Falcone and an interesting conversation. And my favorite part of that scene was definitely whenever Renee, the mind-controlled or nerve-controlled Renee, came in and, you know, just put lead into Falcone. It was quite surprising. And it made for a great, you know, plot point in the story. It was definitely really awesome. So, moving on to number 2 was definitely the auditorium scene when we had, of course, Penguin and the Children of Arkham invading the debate between Mayor Hill and Harvey Dent. This scene was executed perfectly, and it was just really awesome in terms of the action, the information we got in terms of the story about Thomas Wayne and all that kind of stuff. It was definitely really incredible. And of course, working with Catwoman was definitely great as well. So overall, it was a pretty, you know, awesome scene to begin with. And of course, the first scene, you guys know, it is the bar fight between the Penguin thugs and of course Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. This scene was really awesome. It got to put together, you know, Bruce and of course Selina working together without the costumes, and it was definitely a really action-packed scene, a bunch of awesome fighting, and it was definitely really great. It was, you know, just greatly animated as well, and overall that's my favorite scene in the episode. So go ahead and go on to the review for episode 2. Now I'll be going over various things like the story, the choices, the character development, and various other things that made it an awesome change of events from the, you know, Batman origin from what we saw many times before. So I felt like Telltale's doing a great job in making this story their own story. They're changing up details between, you know, Batman's origin with Thomas and Martha Wayne and making them sound a bit more crooked. And it's definitely making for an interesting story, because if you're like a long-time Batman fan, you know that Thomas and Martha Wayne are just, you know, great. They're great people. They're dead, of course, and you don't want their memory to be, you know, trampled on. So here you have a bunch of new details coming out from various sources about what Thomas and Martha Wayne and even Alfred contributed to in terms of working with Falcone and Mayor Hill. It's making for a very interesting story. You're getting constantly more details about various things happening, and one of the best parts of episode 2 is probably the engaging and also just different story we're getting. We're getting a bunch of different details about Thomas and Martha, and of course Penguin, who is now, you know, he has his redesign, he looks different, he acts different, and it's just, you know, that character, Penguin, they're doing a great job, in my opinion, of writing Penguin. This has to be probably the most interesting run of Penguin I have ever witnessed so far. It's definitely really interesting because he has motive. He isn't just going around doing bad stuff. He has motive, he has, you know, proof of what is happening. And overall, including Penguin with a reasonable motive and also a engaging story involving basically what happened with, you know, Thomas and Martha and what they've been doing, like entangling it all into how it affected Penguin, is definitely really interesting. And probably one of the strongest parts in this episode is definitely Penguin and of course the storyline for this episode. So Penguin was definitely, you know, written very well in terms of character development, and now we're going into various other characters like Renee Montoya. We got a bit of her, we got a bit of development on basically how she is as a character, and basically we got some screen time with her, which was definitely really great to, you know, show all these Batman characters and just, you know, give them screen time and development. And speaking of development, they're also doing some development for Alfred, you know, Alfred the butler, and he was involved in what's happening too, so developing him is definitely going a great job as well. And then we got various development from Selina, Mayor Hill. Whenever you were in a scene with them, you were developing that character even more. Now, one thing about development that didn't work out was with Blockbuster. He didn't have any development at all. He was just there to fight, and that was pretty much it. So I would have loved to see some tiny development on Blockbuster, basically why he's working with Penguin, because personally, I think that Blockbuster could probably crush Penguin fairly easily. So I'm wondering, why did Blockbuster choose to work with Penguin and just not be the head himself? We fought him twice, but pretty much he felt like more of an obstacle than a character, in my opinion. So let's move on to the choices that were made in episode 2 and the ones that were brought over from episode 1 and how they affected the story. Now, I played it twice, one with my original choices and one with the opposite of those choices, and going into episode 2 with both of those choices definitely made a little bit of impact. It's nothing really game changing. It's pretty much just, different dialogue in terms of, what if you gave the evidence to Vicky, what if you shook Falcone's hand and helped him out as well. Various things like that came up at certain points. Nothing really too game changing, but it was definitely acknowledged that you made some different choices in episode 1 that affected episode 2's dialogue. Nothing really too big that had really dire consequences, but they were definitely acknowledged. In episode 2, we had a batch of interesting choices as well. Now, going on to the list of choices we had, that ones that are, pretty big and can actually mean something in future episodes, are Kiss Selina could probably come up, I'm not sure, and then maybe Batman or Bruce is a big one, a big choice, and then, helping out Harvey in terms of campaign money, that could be big in the future, and then Harvey or Selina, the last choice, is definitely really, really big. The one choice that didn't really make any difference, or at least, wouldn't make any difference in the future, is whether you gave Falcone the morphine or not. That wouldn't really matter in the future from what I can see. So these choices definitely could come up in the future, and that's why I feel like they can be very great choices. Batman or Bruce Wayne was the first choice we had to pick to tackle a situation as Batman and Bruce Wayne, or Batman or Bruce Wayne, and it was definitely really, really great. I played through both of them, and they were both, very interesting and very different. Okay, and then the Harvey campaign money, that one's kind of a future could happen choice, but Harvey and Selina is the big choice at the end. We had two pretty much big choices in this episode, Harvey and Selina and Batman or Bruce. Now back to Harvey and Selina, that one was a pretty just amazing choice in terms of outcomes, because basically, of course, you go ahead and choose Harvey, then Selina gets shot and she runs away into the alley, and she just runs away, runs out. You don't see her. And then, of course, if you go ahead and save Selina, Oz goes ahead and burns Harvey's face, half of it, and of course he assumes the look of Two-Face, which is crazy. And then of course Selina is kind of laying on Bruce's couch, so definitely a different turn of events that makes you think like, okay, I chose Harvey, so Selina isn't going to be around, but he has his normal face. But then of course, Selina, you choose her, pretty much she's around, but of course Harvey lost half of his face. And then for each choice we had kind of a little epilogue on the aftermath of what happened after each choice, and it made for a very different scenario for both of them, which is always great to have a different story or based on your choices, or a different outcome, which is definitely great for a choice making game. Probably one of the best batch of choices we have so far from episode 1 and 2. So my final critique I can give is that basically the episode was a bit too short. I mean, it wasn't under an hour, but it was definitely around an hour and 18 minutes for me. Now, of course, it was kind of short. Episode 1 was about almost 2 hours, but the problem with that is that episode 2 felt so quality packed, okay? It felt like it had a lot of quality and was definitely really, really great. But the only problem is that it was short. So I guess you can kind of say that, episode 2 had more quality than it did have quantity, and quantity meaning the length. So that's what I'm saying here. Episode 2, it made up for its short length with great quality and great storytelling and great choices, in my opinion. So episode 2 was definitely a great and worthwhile episode, definitely a step above episode 1. So I pretty much have to give it a 9.7 out of 10, because basically my only problems were the lack of Blockbuster, development and pretty much meaning for him, because he was just kind of an obstacle in the way, and then the length of the episode, but that made up for it with quality. So that's pretty much my review for episode 2 of Batman. Tell me your top favorite moments in the episode, and of course, tell me your opinion on episode 2 as well. Thank you all for watching. If you guys did enjoy, go ahead and leave me a thumbs up, and it helps out a lot. It definitely does. So go ahead and drop a like, and of course subscribe if you guys have not already, for more awesome Batman content. I'm InfernoKun, and I'll catch you guys next time on Batman.